not windy.
It was windy when I was
not windy.
When I was outside, it was kind of windy.
It's just breezy.
Okay.
You don't know what the wind is.
So that tree of heaven growing in the concrete silo, the female trees produce up to 300,000 seeds every year.
You have got to be joking.
How many seeds does each blade of Johnson grass produce? Each counting seeds.
Each plant is like 180,000, I think is what they told me at the Master Gardener.
Why are we calling it the tree of heaven? I thought it was the hell tree. Hell, or is it heaven, or is it hell?
Well, it's called the tree of heaven in China for its medicinal value, but conservationists and people that care about like the health of the landscape in America call it the tree of hell because it's so invasive. So it has that dual meaning.
What a great story! This will be good. This will be a good video.
Yeah. So in China, the ancient name is tree of heaven because they revered it for several reasons, but it's so invasive here that a lot of people call it the tree of hell. So this old-fashioned scythe pulled out of the silo of this old dairy, because this farm used to be a dairy, and so the original homesteaders and dairymen of this land, they would use this tool to cut their hay, to cut their silage, to cut their cattle feed. So they would use this tool to cut the grasses, to then either then bundle up as hay, or to then throw in a big old concrete silo to use to ferment, to get the sugar content as high as they can to produce quality food for the dairy cows. It's also historically been used to harvest grain. And that's how we're going to use this tool today. But the thing about a scythe is you got to get it awfully sharp if you want it to cut through those wheat stalks. So that's what we're doing now, is just getting this old tool ready for some new harvesting. In the 21st century, with these climate crises and climate challenges we have, I'm trying to learn how to manage the land with minimal carbon emissions, because there's too much carbon in the atmosphere at this time in the world. And so the scythe is one way of cutting grass or cutting grains without needing fossil fuels as the energy source. The energy source is the sandwich I had for lunch today, instead of oil buried deep in the ground. So I've been interested in scythes for a while. And after digging through the old silo, what do you know? We find an old scythe that's probably been on this ranch for 100 years. Where you can adjust it pretty easily too. And unfortunately, that mechanism isn't quite what I wish it were, so I'm gonna have to do some repairs on that. It's there, and then I went looking for it and found it.
I mean, I just think, just looking at the original, like, all this is original, right? So
yeah.
This thing's got to be like 100 years old, isn't it?
Yeah, I bet this was 1 century old.
I have one in my mouth.
Think about growing without chemicals, you don't have to worry about putting stuff like this in your mouth. Dun dun dun! And so the reason it's called the tree of hell is because it's an invasive species that spreads rapidly and causes trouble for the plant composition of the landscape and can disturb the balance of the ecosystem. And so the tree of heaven, or the tree of hell as I call it, was brought to the United States around the late 1700s. It was originally from China and Taiwan area and brought to the U.S. and made its way to the West Coast where we're at approximately 1850. And that tree's been planted and it has spread viciously. And we are trying to control it because each female tree from the tree of heaven can produce up to 300,000 seeds every single year. So that means 300,000 plants coming up from one. So the problem with invasive species is that they produce rapidly and they outcompete with the native species more than you'd like to see. And so the tree of heaven, the reason it's called that was because of all of the medicinal purposes that tree had. The tree of heaven has been used in Chinese medicine and folk medicine for probably millennia, for a long time. Some of the benefits can be used to alleviate asthma, cramps, diarrhea, even epilepsy. And the bark is the bark from the roots, the bark from the trunk of the tree has been dried and then used to decrease fever and spasms, as well as killing parasites. There's a chemical compound in the tree that can kill parasites in you. So it has a lot of medicinal uses. That's why it's been called the tree of heaven. But those chemical compounds that might have some medicinal purposes, also other chemical compounds in the tree have it to cause those negative consequences to the landscape. It actually exudes some certain chemicals that might inhibit the growth of other plants around it. Somewhat toxic chemicals being exuded from the plant from its natural growth. And so while that may have been just well and fine in China, in an ecosystem like ours, it can wreak some havoc. And so it's a tree that we're trying to control. And when it produces 300,000 seeds a year, it'll take a lot of work to control it. But we're here to try. So in a natural ecosystem context, you wouldn't have these trees coming up everywhere, taking up so much space, choking out others.